Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Today with, well, the second variant of the structure deck that contains Dark Magician and every one of his family members slash friends slash pals slash whatever is in here. I already made a version that I felt like was the most consistent way of playing the deck, and this was meant to be a version that includes the Dark Magician Girl a little bit more, in general the Magician Girls a tiny bit more, and also has the more explosive plays, but isn't as consistent because you do run a few more bricks and you do run a few more cards that, well, don't do that much if you don't exactly have them in the right scenario. In the end, if you kind of combine the spirit of both decks and cut certain things, then you'll probably end up at the most competitive version that you can get out of just the structure deck, because some cards that I have in here I didn't include in the other deck because I wanted to just keep it super consistent, but I should have just put in anyway. And some things in here are probably a bit too over the top because I wanted to focus a bit more on the whole Dark Magician Girl kind of theme, and might not be as good. And I'll be talking about what that is and how you can also turn this into something that is very, very, very good for the fact that is a structure deck. And in my personal opinion, I know Blackwings came out, but the whole Armor Master shenanigans doesn't really work because it's technically not part of the structure deck. So technically, in my opinion, this structure deck is the best structure deck you can get with value without having to add any super or ultra rare cards. And I'll also be talking about what kind of super ultra rare cards you can be adding in from outside as well. Let's start off with the card by card. We have 2 Dark Magician. You can technically run 3, especially in this build because you have some ways of unbricking your hand, but I felt like 2 usually works out. You don't really want to be going into that many rank 7s, well, none at all if for this budget variant, but there are some that you could be playing, and some profit from you having 3 Dark Magicians in your deck. So in theory you can make the case for playing 3. I always felt like in testing the 2 worked out better. There were only like a handful of cases where I would have wanted 3, and mainly I wouldn't have wanted 3 because of the whole brickiness, and we already have issues with that in the first place. Then we have Magician Souls, one of the very, very important cards of this deck. This card can special summon Dark Magician Girl, this card can special summon Dark Magician, and it can bin stuff to the graveyard. It can cycle through things in your deck because it can recycle spell traps and draw you into other cards, and there's lots of different things that you can be doing with this. And it also has a somewhat neat-ish interaction with this trap here, because if this trap is face up sent from the spell trap zone to the graveyard, you can destroy 1 card on the field. So technically you'd have to have this already up for 1 whole turn, and then if you send it to the graveyard by Magician Soul's effect, then you can pop 1 card on the field. So that's crazy. And yeah, this card can not only get you into Dark Magician, but it can also draw you some more cards, recycle through some of your resources, which is not bad either. So you will try to get this card as much as possible. Now, one inclusion that I didn't include in the other deck because, like I said, it is a bit bricky and it doesn't always do stuff. A lot of the time you will have this in your hand, you might not be sure what to do with it. If that goes off, it can be really annoying, and for a grind game this card can make a massive difference in my opinion, but it also is a bit gimmicky. It's a bit annoying from time to time to deal with because you sometimes don't just have the setup for it, but it can get you lots of stuff back. So I wanted to try it out at 1, but also this is one of the cards you could cut if you try to play anything else. If you want to play more hand traps, if you want to go down any other kind of engine routes, then this is one of the cards to definitely cut, because I would say this is one of the weaker links in this specific variant, but also works with the Dark Magician Girl kind of thing. So I wanted to include it in here because this is more of a, well, you can do crazy things with this deck, but sometimes you will end up breaking on cards that just are very situational. We have Triple Magician's Rot, a card that is just genuinely very good, very based that this card is not a super rare and ultra rare in general, so very, very nice cards. You have a nice normal summon, it can recur itself, so that's very nice, and it is searchable, and it searches you any spell trap from your deck that mentions Dark Magician, so that's quite nice. Not Dark Magician Girl, so some cards fall off the back of this one, but it has lots of different applications. We have Triple Chocolate Magician Girl, and that one is new. Let me talk you through this one. This one is very, very interesting because first of all, it allows you to unbrick a little bit. If you end up with the Dark Magician in your hand, then it can get rid of that. It can technically get rid of a Dark Magician Girl as well. It can technically get rid of Illusion of Chaos if you've already used the effect and you want to draw into another card rather than putting some other card back from your hand on top of the deck, and so on and so on and so on. And then you can just draw into the card that you put back as well if you keep this card in hand, and there's lots of different things you can do with this. But this is not the only thing that this card can do, because once per turn, if this card is targeted for an attack, you can target one spellcaster monster in your graveyard, mainly Dark Magician, but could be anything that you can special summon, technically even your extra deck monsters after you've already used them, so this makes it very, very neat. And then you can special summon it, change the attack target to it, and if you do, the attacking monster's attack becomes half its current attack. Makes it very hard for your opponent to deal with this card specifically, because they would have to, well, have a monster that has lots of attack points or is unaffected by these kind of effects to get over your Dark Magician while having half the attack points, because your opponent would technically then have to have a monster with like 5,100 attack points to be able to attack over the Dark Magician. So this card can be very annoying to deal with your opponent. But it's not the best normal summon you have in the deck, because obviously you still have Magician's Rod. So this would also be one of the cards that definitely cut down to 1 or 2 if you want to be playing it at all, and then put on some other engine cards. For example, if you want to be playing the branded package, then this is a bit worse than, for example, just normal summoning a Luber, because a Luber gets you somewhere. This card is just kind of grindy, kind of nice, it recycles certain things, but you see the spellcaster monster count isn't that high, so the whole discard one and draw into one doesn't come in handy all that much, because it's mainly like a spell trap deck and not a monster deck, so you will not be using this all that much. But for the whole Dark Magician Girl, or in general Magician Girl theme, this card works very well and can cause problems for your opponent. The only issue is this card effects is only once per turn, so if your opponent has 2 monsters they can attack over this, it's quite easy to get rid of that, but they will lose 1 monster in the process probably, and you get some card back. And if it's one of the extra spellcasters, then that can be very neat for you as well. 1 Dark Magician Girl, I tried out 2, but 2 really doesn't make much sense. Yes, you have cards that rely on you having Dark Magician Girl, but you will get into this anyway, and just having this sit in your hand doesn't do much, because you can't really get it out of your hand then anymore besides tribute summoning it. So 2 didn't feel all that nice. I felt like 1 is still good enough, but there are more combos in this deck that require you to have Dark Magician Girl rather than in the other variant. 1 Timaeus, yes, Timaeus is a card that I do run, and I prefer running this card over the Eye of Timaeus, mainly because this card is somewhat searchable in certain situations, and also it is a level 8 monster that has 2,800 attack points, so very, very strong if you want to attack over certain things. And the effect isn't too bad, because you can send 1 spellcaster monster or spell trap that mentions Dark Magician from your hand or face up field to the graveyard and special summon this, very nice. And then you can fusion summon 1 fusion monster from extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material, including a spellcaster monster. Very important, because lots of the Dark Magician stuff, or even Dark Magician Girl things, use dragon monsters, so this is one of them, and you can go into that, so you have access to some of the strong fusions that you would need, and this card is searchable, so I feel like a one-off is quite nice. And sometimes this can be coming in handy, because I think you can send the Magician's Combination to the graveyard as well, so you can pop another card, so that's like a neat little mini combo, I want to say, that you can do as well. We have Illusion of Chaos, very, very, very important card. This is the card that searches your Magician's Souls or Magician's Rod. Technically, you can, I think, also search Timaeus, but usually you want to go for one of those 2, because those are your main playmakers. Sometimes you can even go for Dark Magician if you want to, because you can basically reveal this card in your hand. Well, not basically, you can't reveal this card in your hand, add 1 Dark Magician or 1 non-ritual monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand, then place 1 card from your hand on top of the deck. Very important. You can place itself on top of the deck, or you can place any other card in your hand on top of the deck, which then is where the whole Chocolate Magician Girl thing comes in handy, because if you then have this, you can normal summon it. If you didn't search for Magician's Rod, but you went for Souls for some reason, then you can technically discard Illusion of Chaos and then draw it back into the card that you just put on top of the deck, if you'd rather keep that, and so on and so on. But obviously you can also just get the Illusion of Chaos back into your deck as well. So there's lots of different combos with this, I want to call it. For example, with Dark Magical Circle, because you then can also get the card back that you put on top of the deck. It works somewhat with Soul Servant, because you already know what you're going to be drawn into if this card's in your graveyard, and so on. So I feel like this card is very, very nice, and this is where one of the other cards come into play that you possibly should be playing if you want to get the full potential out of this deck, which would be Preparation of Rites. I would say a 2-off, maybe a 3-off, but I feel like 3-off is a bit too much, although you can get rid of it if you have multiple in your hand. with Magician Soul and just draw a card, but at least 2, maybe cut down on 1 Chocolate Magician Girl, cut the Magikuriboh, or cut the Magician's Combination if you want to, or cut one of the Dark Renewals, and then you have access to 2 of 3 of this one, and then you can go into this, plus it's another Ash Blossom bait, so if you have this and Preparation in hand, they might Ash Preparation, and then you can just use the Illusion of Chaos effect, so this isn't too bad either, because this is, I want to say, your main playmaker, because it gives you instant access to your Dark Magician and to any kind of thing that comes with it. One of the cards that I didn't include in my last one, but in this deck profile it plays a massive role, is bond between teacher and student. So they're not really family, they're meant to be, you know, apprentice and master, or whatever it is. So there's that. Sorting that one out. If we control 1 Dark Magician, you can special summon Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, or graveyard, so it's fine if you only run 1, and then you can set 1 Dark Magic attack, Dark Burning Magic, Dark Burning attack, or Dark Magic Twin Burst, very creative names, directly from your deck. Very nice, but you have to make sure, first of all, you can only activate the second effect if you have 1 empty spell trap zone, because you can set the card that you want to set with this card's effect in the same spell trap zone that this card is in when you activate it, because when you activate it, it's still on board when you set it, so you may need to make sure there's still 1 more zone that you can actually place it into, and we only run 1 of these cards, which if we ever draw into it and don't need it, we can still place on top of the deck with Illusion of Chaos. This is also why it makes sense to have multiple of this in deck with Preparation of Rites, so you can get into this more often, because then your deck becomes less bricky, because you can just put bricks back on top of the deck, and that makes the whole thing a lot better. The search cards that we have is Dark Burning Magic. We don't run any of the other ones. They're not like great. You can technically run the card with the Dark Magician Girl, because that destroys some monsters of your opponent, like nukes the board, like a mirror force basically. If you have Dark Magician Girl up, if you want to, you could be playing that as well, but I felt like that makes the deck even brickier if you run multiple of this, and running Dark Burning Magic is a very strong quick spell play. The thing is, if you set it with the effect of a bond between teacher and student, you cannot activate it the turn it's set, because that's just how quick plays work, so you can use it during your opponent's turn then, which is a nice reaction to it. If you still have both of the monsters on board, you nuke the complete board. Very, very nice. But yeah, that adds to the brickiness, because sometimes you have this card, and yes, you can still get a Dark Magician on board. If you have a Dark Magician on your field, you can get Dark Magician Girl on board, but sometimes you don't have that on board, or sometimes you have both of them on board already, or sometimes this just isn't a good card, because you already have used your search for this, like you already have this card in your hand anyway. Then you have a bit of an issue, because then this just summons your level 6 monster out of the deck, which isn't too bad, but obviously you want it to do a tiny bit more than that, because you need quite the setup for it. This also becomes a lot better if you have multiple of this, because then with Magician Souls you have more access to actually Dark Magician, and then you have technically a better chance of getting the effect of this card off as well, but you would still need to search it in a different way as well, so very, very hard to pull this off, but if you pull it off, it is very strong, because you can just whatever your opponent plays at the end of the combo, at the combo where they would then be able to produce a negate to negate this card, then just nuke their complete board, and they have to start from 0. So this is powerful if you get it off. We have Magician Salvation at 2. You can technically run a 3, but I felt like 3 was a bit excessive. This card has some harmonizing play with Dark Magician Girl as well, because you can just summon out the other one if you have one of the other ones on board, and so on and so on and so on. If one of them gets special summoned or normal summoned, then you can summon the other one from your graveyard, which is somewhat nice, because that can help you in the grind game, and your opponent has to be dealing with this as well, plus it sets in Eternal Soul, so not too bad either. And if you have too many of this, if you draw into a second one, you can always get rid of this on board with Magician Soul, draw a card, and then activate the second one, and so on and so on. We have Dark Magical Circle, very nice, because it can trigger not only search stuff when you use it, but also whenever you summon a Dark Magician, then you can banish 1 card on your opponent's side of the field. Very, very nice, except during the damage steps, so it's a bit problematic from time to time with certain effects. I think that means it can't be used with Chocolate Magician Girl, which is a bit annoying, but other than that, it is still a nice card. We have 2 Forbidden Chalice in here. It's mainly just for going second, so you have some options. It's a nice budget card, so you can easily craft this, and you will use this for lots of different budget decks, so it's not a bad card, and sometimes you need this. It's not necessarily bad going first, and it's not necessarily bad going second, so one of these. But if you have good hand traps, for example, like Ash Blossom, Maxi, Nibiru, Infinite Permanent, you usually want to run this over Forbidden Chalice. But also this card comes in handy from time to time if you play cards like the Dark Magicians, because if you draw into it, then you can instantly use it and you have one monster negate. Already talked about Dark Burning Magic. We have Soul Servant. In this variant, we get Dark Magician Girl and Dark Magician to the graveyard on board a lot more often, so we will be drawing 2 cards with this more often than usual, plus this is still somewhat of a surge. If you have Magician Souls and you have access to Dark Magician, then this card becomes like a surge. But if you don't have access to Dark Magician at the start, then this card is just well, during the next turn, this card will be a bit good, but right now it doesn't do anything for you, which is why the whole preparation of rights comes in handy again, because then you have more access to Illusion of Chaos, and then you have more access to Magician Souls, and then you have more access to Dark Magician as well, so this card becomes a tiny bit better as well. But plus, it's technically a Surge plus a Pot of Greed, so not all that bad in a lot of scenarios, but like I said, some of the things will be a bit brickier if you don't get your combo off, but if you have your combo, then this card becomes a lot better in this version. 1 Secrets of Dark Magic, mainly because it's so searchable, and you can even recycle it with a Soul Servant, because Soul Servant doesn't only put stuff from your deck on top of your deck, but also from your graveyard, so you have a way to get back into this at will, so 1 should be fine. And this time you can go into some crazy fusions. Technically you can also ritual summon Illusion of Chaos. Usually you don't want to, but it's not the worst thing you could be doing. It is possible, but yeah, this card as a quick spell can be very helpful. 2 Dark Renewal, because you try to go first with this deck, obviously, because it's a control deck, and this is a way to get your missing puzzle piece, because you can special summon out things like Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, whatever you're lacking. So I like to have a bit of a way of getting into this, and we run a bit more normal summonable spellcasters, so this one works a lot better now, because even if you have Chocolate Magician Girl, you can just get rid of that one and send them to the graveyard. Then you can special summon that Dark Spellcaster, which would be one of those 2 usually, but technically you can even get Magician Souls or Magician's Rod into the rotation if you want to, and it's some form of removal. The only problem is the when effect, a bit annoying, but it is what it is. Torrential Tribute, very nice card, because like I said, this deck is a bit bricky, and Torrential Tribute can buy you a turn, so that is not bad at all. And it has some nice effects with the Dark Magicians as well, because you can set it if you draw into it and then use it instantly, and then the Dark Magicians float into 1 Dark Magician and 1 Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, or graveyard, so very, very nice with that one. Lost Wind, just good in a grind game, also can help you beat over certain monsters. Eternal Soul protects your Dark Magicians, sadly not all spellcasters or monsters that mention Dark Magician, but just the Dark Magicians. And yeah, you can keep special summoning them back, but obviously if this card gets lost, then your whole board is kind of screwed. And we have Magician's Combination, a card that when you have the requirements for it, it is very, very good. But usually a lot of the time you won't, so it's a bit annoying. If you can get it off, really nice, because you keep special summoning things back, and it works quite well in combination with Salvation, and then you can negate stuff, and then you can always get rid of it on the field to pop 1 card. So very, very neat, but also you brick on it quite a lot, because a lot of the time you won't have the right setup for it. So this would also be one of the cards that you kind of want to be getting rid of a little bit. It is what it is in the end. Sometimes you want to play the most explosive stuff, but it won't always work out. We have Dark Magician Girl, the one that rides the dragon. Very, very nice attack stats, and you can quick effect discard stuff from your hand. And funny enough, it says you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. It doesn't say discard, and it's not for cost, so that is also a bit hilarious. Then you can target 1 face-up card in the field, destroy that target. Very, very nice. So not too bad to go into with Dark Magician Girl and the Timaeus as well. Plus, sadly, this card is a dragon, not a spellcaster, so you can't summon it back with things like Chocolate Magician Girl. Bit annoying, but it can be worth it going into this. We have Amulet Dragon, kind of the same thing, but it's a bit worse than the other one, because this banishes all your spells, usually something you don't necessarily want to be doing. And if this card is destroyed, you can target 1 spellcaster monster in your graveyard, special summon, so at least you can get any kind of thing back. One of the better ones is the Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight, because it is first of all counted as Dark Magician while on the field or in the graveyard, so you can summon it back with Eternal Soul. And with this card, your opponent cannot target spell traps you control with card effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So this protects things like your Dark Magic Circle. It protects your Eternal Soul, which is very important. Your field spell as well, technically, and even your combination if you want. So that is all possible. Plus this card is sadly also a dragon, so we have that bit of an issue when it comes to the whole spellcaster kind of thing, but it is what it is. This card is very neat because of 3000 attack points, and you can keep summoning it back, and your opponent will have issues with dealing with this. This is the only card why Eye of Timaeus can be super helpful, because if you have this out and your opponent can't really clear your whole combo, then you can out-resource your opponent very, very easily. To the Dark Magicians, this card very important in this deck because you can easily get 2 of your main playmakers on board with this if it's destroyed, and you only need 1 Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl plus 1 Spellcaster monster, which you have quite a lot of, so it's not too bad either. And once per turn, if a spell trap or effect is activated, you can draw 1 card, and if it was a spell trap, you can set it, and if it was a trap or quick play spell, you can activate it this turn. So this is how you technically get like Torrential Tribute life during your turn. It's a bit like a King Backjack, if I'm not mistaken, from the effect. And if this card is destroyed, you can special summon both 1 Dark Magician and 1 Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So not too bad either, and I think this should work even if it's destroyed by battle, because it doesn't just say card effect. We have Master of Chaos here, a card that I underestimated at the start, but can be quite handy in terms of OTKing, because I think there's like a 2-card combo if your opponent doesn't have any cards anymore on board, which with Torrential Tribute or with the whole Dark Burning Magic can come in handy a bit more often than the other variant. Then you can use this card to OTK your opponent if you use the whole Secrets of Dark Magic. So you attack with things like Magician's Rod, and then during the battle phase you summon, basically you get rid of Dark Magician and Illusion of Chaos that you have somewhere, then you can go into Master of Chaos that summons Dark Magician back, and then you have enough attack points to finish your opponent, so not too bad with this one. Also, technically you can nuke your opponent's board a bit with it, so that's quite nice. And if this fusion summon card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target 1 spell card in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So neat effect. Usually you technically only need 1 of it, but your extra deck isn't that full, so you could cut 1 of that. Shouldn't come up more often than once. We have a triple Imduk in here just for the fact that this is a way to get your Dark Magician into the graveyard, and sometimes you need this so you can use the Eternal Soul effect again, and this card is also dragon, so you have 1 dragon material if you want to be a fusion summoning something like this, because 1 Dark Magician, 1 dragon monster, 1 Dark Magician, 1 dragon monster, and even for this one it does work as well, so this can be quite helpful. And technically, if your opponent places their monsters a bit weirdly, then you can be doing stuff with this card's effect as well, so it's not terrible. Could cut it down to 2, but I feel like they're in the grind game, you kind of want to have a way to get your Dark Magician into the graveyard very easily, so this can be helpful, but you also can just link it off in other stuff. We have Geonator Transverser, not as good in here because you need 2 effect monsters, so you could technically run any other link 2 that works for you. There's like IP Masquerena you can go into because you only need 2 non-link monsters, and then you can play some Nightmare stuff and whatnot. It's quite good. You have Decode Talker as a budget card because you get this card for free. Same for Ningirsu, which is somewhat neat in here because technically you can draw a card. You'd have to have some very, very, very strange zone placement for that to work out. I don't think it's even possible in this specific variant, but you could make it happen that you can get the draw. And this card has another nice effect. You can send 1 card from each player's field to the graveyard, and then, send both cards. So your opponent, it's a non-targeting and non-destruction removal that you have at will. So not too bad either, just to keep that one in mind. And needs 2 link monsters, which isn't too hard to get either. It's technically possible, but yeah, you can play any other link 3 as well. We have Raster Liger, one of the budget cards, obviously stuff that you could be playing. Access Code Talker if you have it, but the problem is this, they all need effect monsters. This one doesn't, so we have 2+ monsters except tokens, and you don't have any tokens either, so this card can be coming in more handy than some of the other ones that all need effect monsters. You just need some link monster in the graveyard to push this card's attack points. Other cards that you should or could be running, obviously hand traps are very, very nice for the extra deck. Big Eye is a card that can come up. Galaxy Tomahawk can come up if you want to play it with certain other combos. It's a very strong rank 7 monster, but you'd have to commit some other stuff in your extra deck to it. You can run these 2. Even High Magician, very, very, very interesting card, and I feel like it should have seen more play, but I don't know. It's good, and if you have it, I would play it. It can come out from time to time. You can activate spell or trap cards from your hand during your opponent's turn, very, very nice. And also you can special summon Dark Spellcaster monster from your hand or deck and destroy 1 card in the field if this card is sent to your graveyard or destroyed by battle. So very neat effect actually. It's not that bad of an effect whatsoever. IP Masquerena, quite nice. Obviously, you could be playing Allure of Darkness because you run lots of darkness stuff, and you kind of value your spell traps more than your monsters, but that's just to unbrick yourself a bit, and sometimes with this, you would get rid of certain things like Dark Magician that you don't want to be getting rid of. Could play the Eye of Timaeus, but I don't feel like it's worth it. We have Pot of Extravagance if you want to, then you just have to run triple of all of this stuff that matters, the fusions, and the rest doesn't really matter all that much. You could get away with it, but I didn't really overly like it. I tried it out and it wasn't too great. I felt Pot of Prosperity was a bit better to add some consistency to the deck and get into stuff that you need. Obviously, there's the whole branded fusion package that you could be running. It's basically like some of the extra deck stuff, triple banded fusion, 2 Alibur, 2 of the card that special summons it, and some of the Despia stuff and whatnots. There's probably deck profiles out there that explain that a bit more, and obviously things like Called by the Grief and Infinite Impermanence. Let's move it to the replay where I show you what this deck can do. Alright, the first replay is mainly to show what kind of board this deck can produce if you have a very, very strong hand. And it's not so much about the gameplay here, it's just about what kind of options do you have. You already have like a normal summon that searches your stuff, you have Illusion of Chaos to get into the other one that you don't have. We have a way to fusion summon, we have a way to get the Dark Magical Circle live, we have Soul Servant here so we can search some more stuff because we have a way of technically going into Dark Magician depending if they have a hand trap or not. So let's see what we can be doing here. I use Dark Magical Circle first because I already have a very strong hand. It doesn't matter all that much what I get from here because I already have a guaranteed search with Magician's Rod depending on what my opponent has. So if you can bait an Ash Blossom with this in these kind of situations, it would be the best if they used it now because then you can still continue with your plays the way you want it to. Other than that, you would have to, well, kind of compensate for it a little bit more. So let's see what happens here. And they did use an Ash Blossom, so it did work out in the end. That is kind of what I wanted them to do here. Not sure if that's a good thing to do, but Ash Blossom can usually hurt Dark Magician quite a bit, so you don't usually want to let them search. It is what it is. Worked out for us. So now going for the Dark Magician's Rod. And the thing is, technically, if they had some Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler, this would have made a bit of a difference, but we could have still done quite a lot because we still have Timaeus, we still have Illusion of Chaos, and we still have Soul Servant here, so we would have still been able to do quite a bit. I searched Magician's Salvation. Not only do I have a card to get rid of them on board because I don't have the whole Dark Magician combo live at the moment anyway, but also I get access to Eternal Soul with this one, very important to trigger the circle during the opponent's effect. So I felt like this was a neat search here. Deck thinning a little bit, going into Eternal Soul, then using Illusion of Chaos to do some stuff, setting this card back because we don't really need it anymore this turn. Now going into Souls, sent Dark Magician to the graveyard, and I did decide to summon Dark Magician here. Could have also gone for the Souls effect and got rid of this one and got one extra draw in, but I felt like the extra draw wasn't that necessary because what I can do with having Dark Magician on board now is first of all I get one draw, so I can search another card, have bond between teacher and student, so we already have that combo live, which isn't too bad either. So we have this one, and now we still have Timaeus. I get rid of the Magician's Rod that we have, and now I go into a card that doesn't only make it still, so we have Dark Burning Magic live, but we also have protection for a back row now, which is Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight. So we still have Magician's Salvation, so we can still technically, if we summon some stuff or they get rid of some of our stuff, then we can still summon one Dark Magician from the graveyard or one Dark Magician Girl, whatever we want. We have Eternal Soul live with a Dark Magician in the graveyard, so we can instantly get rid of one of those things. We have protection for all of our back row, and we have Dark Burning Magic that gets rid of their complete field spell, and they are on a hand of 5 cards. And this is, I think, one of the better boards this deck produces if you don't have any hand traps or whatnot, because obviously they can win you the game by itself, and yeah, the opponent has to be dealing with this one in one way or another. And in the end, I think it turns out that they just surrender because they didn't find a way to deal with this. The thing is, it's very, well, they know what you're doing. You obviously show them what cards you search because they know we have the Dark Burning Magic, they know we have the Eternal Soul, they know what we have in the graveyards, and they know we have nothing in our hands. So very televised play, but they still have to find a way around it, and if they don't, then that becomes a bit sad for them. Let's see how this deck fares in a normal duel where you actually get to do things. Alright, this is a going second duel, which isn't quite really rare for decks that try to do control style, but the opponent just does something, well, a bit interesting. I think they play a deck with lots of 1-off, 2-off, 2-card combos to go into annoying stuff. fed by some hand traps as well. They go into Stone King Darius here, and then with that one they go into Divisor King Deus Ex, so they have 2 times if we activate a monster effect they can yoink our monster, so that's not too bad as well, plus fed with 3 cards that they still have in hand, so this could be literally anything. It's an interesting style of deck, so I've wanted to showcase this one off as well. And now, how do we deal with this? It's not an oppressive board, but it's also not like the worst board of all time, because if you play like a more monster focused deck, they can disrupt you quite a lot. There's not much we can do about it, but obviously if you had kaijus or any kind of form of negation, they would have a bit of an issue. I decided to start with the Magician's Soul here, get Dark Magician to the graveyard, and this time I wanted to go into Magician's Souls just because of the fact that I could technically get rid of some things and draw into stuff. The thing is, I could have also done it differently. I could have gone into Dark Magic Circle first, searched some stuff, then summoned Dark Magician and just instantly got rid of this card. I kind of missed that play at the time, because obviously you can also use the effect of a Circle during your turn that banishes, not just during your opponent's turn with Eternal Soul, but you can also use it with Magician's Souls, especially going second. So this probably would have been a bit of a smarter play here, because we would have instantly gotten rid of this, because this one doesn't have any form of protection against this. But they do have an Ash Blossom here, like I said, hand fed with hand traps here, and I thought, let's get rid of this, let's try and bait out the effect of that one and draw 2. Not too bad for us here, because with the Magician's Rod, technically we still have a way of getting into Dark Magic Circle later on, and it doesn't really matter because we have Torrential Tribute to stall anyway, and the deck didn't look too explosive, so we should be super scared for them to OTK us. So I got rid of Circle here to draw possibly into some cards that would help us go into some of the fusions and whatnot, but obviously could have been risky. Possibly should have just kept this set Eternal Soul and passed, and then just went on from there as well. You can always make a case for anything. Now they get this card on here. We actually draw into stuff that helps. Another Torrential Tribute isn't bad, and Soul Servant is another search that can actually help us get into our fusion. They yoink this card as well, but we get another search, so it's not too bad either. I get the fusion card here, and now we draw into the Illusion of Chaos, so we have monsters ready as well for our turn. We get Dark Magician Girl, so we have that in rotation, get rid of one of the Torrential Tributes, and now we can, during our opponent's turn, go into basically anything. We have Eternal Soul, so we can get Dark Magician back, and we still have 1 Torrential Tribute, so not terrible, but obviously you see sometimes you have to make decisions, and I think I could have made better ones at that. So yeah, keep that in mind. We learn from mistakes the most, and that is one of the big mottos of this channel, because I am terrible at playing this game. The only thing I can somewhat do is build decks. So let's see what they're doing. They don't have anything now. They want to go for this one. I summon the Dark Magician, then go for the fusion, and mainly do it to clear their board here. It's kind of a pointless play, but I wanted to have a board presence during the next turn and be able to possibly finish the game with Illusion of Chaos. And if they don't have anything in hand that does much, then there was a realistic chance to go for an OTK here, because now we can show off that combo as well. Technically I would have been able to trigger the Dark Magicians and special summon both of them, and yeah, but they have Ash Blossom again, so we can't be doing that again, and now we have only 1 monster left basically during our turn, but we still have Illusion of Chaos plus 2 cards in hand, so this will not be all that bad. We get the Torrential Tribute that we put on top of our deck. We get Magician's Rod now, so we can search whatever we want. We can get into a draw 2 again, because we now have Dark Magician Girl in the graveyard, so we can gain even more resources. At this point I think I should have just kept the card. Oh no, I had the issue that I had Secrets of Dark Magic in the graveyard. Now I could have gone for the Fusion OTK if I'm not mistaken, if I kept the Illusion and then used that one and the Dark Magician during the battle phase to summon into the one that then summons Dark Magician back, and then we could have easily OTK'd them, so I would not have to have done any of these combos. This was completely out of bounds here. Would have easily been able to finish this game here. Decided to attack, and then that's where they had the Elemental Hero. So in the end, kind of okay that I didn't go for this one, but for the more grindy play style, because yeah, would have been punished at least a tiny bit if I didn't, because now getting rid of this is not so easy, and they get Neos Fusion, so very upsetting with that one. Have 1 Torrential Tribute, said this, and we have technically one way of summoning the Dark Magician in hand. I could have gone into the extra deck monster to get this card to the graveyard, but I kind of wanted to make them feel like I don't have a way of getting into Dark Magician, and that they don't have to fear this by just keeping this one in hand and concealing that information from them, rather than just linking this one off as well. So this was another option. They now have Neos Fusion. They go into Elemental Hero Neos Kluger, and not the other one. I would have thought they're going to Rainbow Neos to clear our board here, apparently this deck is a bit different, but you can already see they play lots of one card kind of things fed by hand traps, and I found that very, very interesting. Here I thought, why not Torrential Tribute to get rid of the Neos Fusion protection. Now we can get rid of this one as well, but I wanted to do it after the battle phase because I wasn't quite sure if they were playing Neos Wiseman and how that whole effect works. So I did want to have Neos Wiseman in their battle phase, but I wanted them to not be able to attack anymore because I could easily get 3000 damage, no problem, and then get rid of this card with the whole Eternal Soul combo here. But turns out they either don't run the cards that they could have summoned off, or this is not quite how the effect works. But like this, we get the whole full combo through, we get Magician's Rod back to our hand, we get rid of this card, and the board is clear once again. We draw into Magikuriboh, another card that does some stuff here. We go into Bond between teacher and student because we can easily get that one off, get Dark Magician out of the deck, then we'll have Dark Magician Girl, set this card, and try to push for game here, because technically I could have searched for the card that searches me a card and draws me to get the fusion back, and then go to fusion place, and I could have easily finished the game here again. But like I said, it's very hard to sometimes spot this, but we learn from it. If we go into the Soul Servant here, we can place one card on top of the deck from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So we could have placed this card on our deck, then drew two because we had these two, then we could have fusion summoned during our turn, but we would have not have had the whole Dark Burning Magic ready for the next turn, but we wouldn't have needed it anyway. I think this would have been a game because we still had enough materials to go into some crazy stuff. It is what it is. Sometimes you do miss that, but we still have a nice recovery. They only have 3 cards in hand, and that is when they concede. Alright, this was Dark Magician, this structure deck, fed with some normals or rares that you can easily craft and that make the deck a lot better. I hope you liked the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.